So I've run into a very interesting story here. The fact that Ballerina is not doing very well, which surprises me because the film is pretty good. I rated it a 7 if you watched my review video, which is right up there. And I thought that for the money and for the time, 2 hours well spent, at least something that was enjoyable and exciting and allowed me to leave the theater with something of a positive impression. But I'm not the only one that has this. We've got a few folks out there, including Thorius, that's actually in the same ballpark. Brett Dasovic over there at Pop Culture Crisis, and many others are coming back with the same kind of feeling when they leave the theater. So I'm going to leave it to Deadline to try to explain why it's only crossing the $25 million opening domestically, and why that may not matter, because it made a lot of money in pre-sales to other services, which will isolate it from its box office performance and the expectations people like myself already had, and why it's likely going to get a sequel, and Ballerina, the Eve character, is likely to appear in John Wick 5. But before we get started, a quick reminder, I'm trying to get to 50K. That's right, we are just a mere 10,000 subscribers away from 50K. In other words, we're about 40K right as I speak, and we should be there by the end of the weekend. Of course, that's all courtesy of you watching this video right now. And for those of you who are here for the first time or the 1,000th, and double check that you're still subscribed. If you're not, do me that kind favor and expect information and analysis from now until the end of time, because, well, or the end of me is probably a better way to say it. On that note, let's jump into the Deadline article that inspired this video and maybe explain some of what I didn't anticipate. So, from Deadline, Antony himself actually writes something that made sense. That's right, why Ballerina didn't leap into the rafters with $25 million opening. This is the Sunday box office update, and so I guess this will also double as my box office analysis for the weekend, which wasn't a big surprise, but the underperformance, in my opinion, of Ballerina was. At the start, Antony says, after the Saturday AM update, one of the most intriguing yet mind-boggling dynamics in moviegoing is that which prevents audiences from getting off the couch, even when word of mouth out there is great on a movie. And I will say, I've heard nothing negative. I haven't heard anybody say this is the best movie of the year, and you're not going to, but I have heard people come out and say this was really good. It was worth the time. It was worth the effort. It was worth the money. And that's usually satisfying enough for an audience to go and check something out. And I'm going to say it again. This is an earned hero's journey, and that means to me, there's no political garbage that's in the way of anybody enjoying this. It doesn't even get into it, nor does it talk about it. And despite the fact that there are people of different races and different genders, this film is not about any of that. It's about revenge of a sort and the consequences behind it, at least when you get to the end of the movie, and we'll talk about that here in a moment. Now, there may be slight spoilers in here, but according to Antony over there at Deadline, such was the dilemma this weekend for Lionsgate's John Wick offshoot Ballerina, which didn't budge from the $25 million opening even after an A- CinemaScore. Now, mind you, A- is pretty good. It's that point at which you think these films are going to be profitable. And it should be, because everybody who was in that theater came out of it, for the most part, loving it. Or else the score would be much lower. Like, well, a B or B+. Those are some of the recent Disney ratings for some of their absolute flops, but we'll leave them aside for now. Oh, and by the way, that CinemaScore, that A- is the best of all the John Wicks in the series. And there's a reason for that. While that grade for Len Wiseman directed movie is under the franchise's best in show, John Wick Chapter 4's A, it's well above the original John Wick's B, and in the same great company as John Wick's 2 and 3, which also nabbed an A-. That's pretty good. Friday for Ana de Armas' movie was a $10.65 million, including previews from obviously Wednesday and Thursday, because they figured they'd break it up and then start the movie later. In fact, this film started 2 full hours later than it should have, 4 full hours from other things that have opened recently, which I couldn't figure out. I also didn't figure out why they delayed the embargo and made it so late in the game from reviewers saying how good the film was and how much they enjoyed it, because early Rotten Tomatoes scores came in quite high. The global numbers were also disappointing in that it made 51 million in 82 territories. That's not great. This should have been over 100 million at least, and I have a feeling that perhaps that's going to be a problem. Antony says, it's clear a portion of the John Wick faithful loved this movie, as did Deadline critic Gregory Nussin. Antony didn't have any patience for it, by the way. But Ballerina never jumped into its forecasted 35 million plus. Again, it's not a good sign for any studio when you show up on tracking at point A and drop down to point B or C. This happened recently with Karate Kid Legends because the movie, the premise, the story, and everything about it was below subpar. In fact, everybody that I know that have seen that film says it's quite garbage. But not so with Ballerina. Well, there's something to be said when a movie popped on tracking way up there 3 weeks ago, and respondents were upbeat about the movie, and that was from the world of John Wick, which everybody now is pretty familiar with. Early on, when they noticed that the film wasn't entirely about Keanu Reeves, that may have had some effect in people holding back their interest and enthusiasm. And yet, I'm going to say it this way. There was a final trailer that indicated that John Wick would be in a significant portion of this film. And the supporting person in this film that needed to be there was amazing for somewhere between 12 and 20 minutes, making sure not only that the ballerina survived this endeavor, but also that there would be a guaranteed sequel. I don't think that the earnings will have anything to do with that, considering from the director and other people involved in this particular project have already begun to plan for said sequel. And according to Antony, one of the people that works in film finance that he knows, one of his sources, actually yelled at him about the performance of Ballerina, asking this question: if their exits were so great, why the heck has the review embargo lifted so late? And that's a great question. It's something that I would ask people. When you wait until the last moment, let's say Wednesday, June 4th, the day before previews began, you're not setting yourself up for a whole lot of success. And as is pointed out here in the article, there were opportunities here to tell everybody how great this was by sending it through the festival circuit like South by Southwest. After all, it would just be following in the tradition of John Wick Chapter 4, which everybody seemed to enjoy at that time. But it's quite possible, as Antony suggests here, that people didn't know this was going to be a non-stop action film. I mean, it wasn't exactly advertised that way until, well, the very end, and the title didn't scream out non-stop action. Well, there's a reason for that, and it didn't really work. They may have been better off saying Ballerina, A Tale of Revenge from the world of John Wick, or something like that. I just feel like you needed to maybe convey to the audience that this was going to be an automatic good time. And perhaps there were other factors in play, like PLF screen. You see, 40% of the box office being muscled this last weekend was this film being on 1,000 of those PLFs, which usually earn more money and more excitement and definitely higher word of mouth because people went to see this in the largest screen they possibly could. In fact, in the heart of Hollywood, you had AMC's Burbank Theater grossing $72,000, and that is a substantial amount of money in earnings. At the end of the day, none of that's going to matter. It's going to be what did this do in its final box office performance, and this will only be aided by all of the positive word of mouth that we've been hearing. I'm just hoping that it gets that positive word of mouth, because if any film deserves it, this one does. Now, there is another John Wick movie conversation coming up later this week, as I have two articles, both from Screen Rant, that I need to present to you as the future of the world of John Wick, because there is a future, and a big one, and we should probably talk about that as well. I'm at the end of the line, but you're not. This is the time when I want to hear what you have to say about John Wick Ballerina, and whether or not you've seen the film, or if I finally talked you into taking a look at it. If you have any other comments, let me know them in the comments section down below, as I said. On that note, be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, and until next time, see ya! Maybe at Ballerina again.